Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching. I wanted to go over some differences in Irish terms and expressions. I know this video has been done a few times, but I wanted to contribute as well. These are a few terms that you might find handy if you're coming out this way. Now don't worry, a lot of Irish are well used to Americans. They know our expressions, they know everything that we say due to a lot of the TV shows that they watch that are American, movies, and just a lot of Americans coming over. I'm going to try my best to group things together as best I can, but also just rattle them off as fast as I can as well. Let's get the first one out of the way. Top of the morning to you is not as common as we think it is. You'll come over, and if you try and say it to somebody, they might get a little annoyed at you. But I do know that apparently if it is said to you, you're supposed to say, and the rest to you. So if somebody gives you the top, you give them back the rest. You would occasionally hear Irish call Americans Yanks or Yankees. Not very common, but you will hear it. A stone is 14 pounds. You'll hear a lot of people talk about this as well. They'll measure something saying it's 10 stone or what have you, and you just have to do the math on that. If someone is new to an area, they call them a blow-in. Now, I feel bad because my mother-in-law, she's from Dublin. She's lived in Cork for over 35 years, and apparently they'd still call her a blow-in. So I think once you're titled it, it's hard to get away from. Last I checked in the States, calling someone a spaz or a spastic is not the worst thing in the world. Here it's a lot more offensive, so be careful where you use it. A hair tie is a go-go or a bobbin. A fringe is your bangs. I'm hoping I'm getting a lot of these right. I did double check a lot of them with my husband, but we'll see. Tea time is kind of described more as dinner time, so if they say call in to us around tea time, it might mean 6 or 7. I love when they use the word fierce. There's something so great about that word, but they'd use that. They'd say, you know, carrying around your umbrella is fierce handy. They also use the word pure a lot, kind of in the place of the word absolutely that we would use. So let's say if you bumped into somebody and you forgot their name, you would tell someone you were pure mortified over it. What we'd call a pacifier, they'd call a doty here or a dummy or a soother. A buggy is a stroller. This one I hear my husband say a lot. It's to say, I'd forget my head if it wasn't attached. So say you forget your car keys when you walk out the door, you'd come back in and you'd say that. If you go to a multi-level building, the ground floor is what we call the first floor. What we'd call the second floor is the first floor, and it goes up from there. What we'd call a laundry room, they'd call the utility room. More often, they'd call cookies biscuits. Here, a bachelorette party is called a hen party, and a bachelor party is called a stag. They'd use the word Baltic to say it's freezing cold outside. Similar to how we use the word bucks as slang for money, they would use the word bob. So if you got your hair cut and you said, oh, it was a few bob to get this done. Similarly, they'd say that something was dear to say that it was very expensive. So, oh, I bought this sweater, but it was quite dear. Same way that we would say, oh, what's his face? They'd say, oh, your man or your one. To say you were locked is to say you were very drunk. Gaff is what they would use to describe a house. So if they say, oh, let's go to your gaff tonight, that's to go to your home. Ironically, we would use the word grand to describe something magnificent. Here, it's really just to say it's okay. So if you said, how was your day? Oh, it was grand. It's to say it was okay. They would say happy out, same way we would just say happy. So if you said, how did your son get on waiting so long for the dentist? They say, oh, he had his favorite toy. He was happy out. To say someone is being cheeky is to say that they're asking for more than they're worth, really. I actually haven't heard this one a lot, but my husband was mentioning it. He said to say that it's splitting stones outside is to say it's very hot. Kind of just a space filler, the way they would just say, they'd say, yourself, or they would say, sure, look it. If it's pouring rain, a lot of times they'll say it's lashing. They'd use the word ratty to describe somebody who's quite irritated. Here, jelly is jello, and what we would call jelly is what they would call jam. Bacon here is honestly kind of more like a thick piece of ham. You wouldn't find our crisp, streaky bacon very often here. To say, I will, yeah, means absolutely not. To describe a long time, they would say donkey's ears, or they would also say ages. So if you said you were waiting ages, it meant you were waiting a long time. On the piss is another way to describe going out and drinking big time. You'd hear a lot of people saying fair play here, which is kind of like congratulations or good for you. So if you said, oh, I just got a new job, they'd say, oh, fair play to you. A CV is your resume. Now, the Irish never shy away from saying swear words, but just to clean things up, a lot of the times they'll say stuff like feck, shite, arse. It's just like our way of saying, oh darn. But what's really hilarious to me is gob means mouth. So if somebody's being called a gobshite, which is quite common, you can interpret what that means. If somebody's not really with it, you would say, oh, they're away with the fairies. Fire trucks and firefighters are called the fire brigade. Police are the Gardaí or the guards. On that note, here 911, you would dial 999. A lot of people here in Ireland would have studied Irish growing up, and you'd find that they would mix in Irish words in with a lot of their just day-to-day language. Before I came, I thought it was called Celtic or Gaelic, but they actually would call it Irish. And Irish in Irish is ascuelga, so you'll hear them say that quite a bit too. A common Irish word that you'd hear a lot is craic, C-R-A-I-C, and that's to mean fun or a good time. So a lot of the times you'd hear people say, oh, how's the crack, or it was great crack, or what have you, and that's what they're meaning. There is a president here, and you would call him the president, but also Irish for leader, as far as I know, is the Taoiseach, and that's a different representative here in the government. Also, their political parties are in Irish, so you'd have the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin, so you'd hear them talking about those quite a bit too. I love this word. To say somebody's just the bee's knees, you would call them a legend. Same way we would say we were getting after someone, they would say they would give out, but that is also to say that somebody is complaining. So would you stop giving out about the bad weather? If someone's really disappointed, they'll say that they're gutted. And apparently that's to say like having a fish that's being gutted and its insides are being ripped out. That's what it's in comparison to. You'll hear them say a lot that they were haunted, which is to say that they can't believe how lucky they were. So they went for a hike and the weather was fantastic and they were haunted over it. To say someone's punching is to say that they are with someone much better looking than they are. Now kids, cover your ears, but to say that you pulled on a night out is to mean that you brought someone home with you for extracurricular activities. So you'll hear a lot of people after a night out that someone will ask them, oh, did you pull? To get on with someone like a house on fire, like they say, is to say that you got on really well, really quickly. To tell someone to cop on is kind of like pull yourself together. Or if somebody has a lot of cop on, kind of to say that they're very mature. Likewise, to say someone is thick is kind of calling them stupid. I've heard people say stop the lights, which is to say stop everything, but I've also heard it in response. So kind of the same way we would say, oh, don't I know it? So if you said something and somebody responded, oh, stop the lights, is kind of more of a Dublin word, but you'll hear people say story a lot, which is to say, how's it going? They would say, what's the story? People saying come here or come here to me, it's kind of a way of saying listen up. Similarly, they would say go away, but they say it kind of in a shortened version. You'll hear them say go away, or to just say stop. So in a way, kind of the way we would say, oh, don't I know it? So if somebody's talking to you and you just know exactly how they're feeling, you say, oh, go away or stop. I actually thought it was funny when I first moved here that everyone was called lads. So even a group of girls, they'd be like, oh, lads. But to be honest, Americans, I would call everyone guys back home. So how is it much different? Here to say you is singular. It's only talking about one person. If you're talking about two or more people, it's ye. So it's you over there and the two of ye. There's also yourself and me-self. I love those. There's also you know yourself. It's kind of a nice way of saying, well, yeah, isn't that obvious? So if someone were to ask, is the traffic bad at 5 o'clock? They'd be like, you know yourself. I don't know how popular these are in general, but I've certainly heard it a lot where terms of endearment, people would call each other love, they'd call each other flower, but I've also heard them call each other chicken. And I've heard that from multiple people. I've heard it multiple times. So I'm like, this is definitely a thing, and I haven't heard it in the States. Back home, you would have your wallet, which here is called the purse. And then your purse would be your bag. And a wallet is kind of exclusively for men. They wouldn't say mom here. They would say ma'am or mum. And ma'am isn't like, yes, ma'am. It's like M-A-M, ma'am. Don't get offended. A fag here or a ciggy, they're cigarettes. You'll be on nights out. You'll hear somebody say, can I bum a fag off you? It's nothing offensive. They're just looking for a cigarette. This one almost got my brother into a street fight. So here, their way of saying, can I help you? They would say, are you all right? Or kind of like, you all right? And he thought they were saying like, do you want to fight me? But really it just means, can I help you? And who's next? Similarly, where we would say, excuse me, or can I beg your pardon? They would just say sorry. So if you're looking for help in the shop and you go up to a worker, you'd start off with, sorry, where do you find such and such a thing? A naggin is a small bottle of alcohol. Runners here are tennies. The bonnet is the hood of your car and the boot is the trunk. You'll also hear the expression, oh, put the boot down, which is to say you're going to drive very fast. So if you're running late somewhere and you said you're going to put the boot down, it means you're going to get it there as quickly as possible. Where we would ask someone for a ride, here they would say a lift. A ride is kind of exclusively meant for something else. A pen is a biro and an eraser is a rubber. To say something is banjaxed is to say that it's broken. To make out with someone is to shift. A stovetop is a hob. Bathroom is a loo or a toilet. Vacuum is hoover. A broom is called a brush here. What we'd call a parking lot, they'd call a car park. Someone who is sarcastic, they would call sarky. If something works really well for you, it suits you down to the ground. What we would have as elementary and middle school is primary school here. High school is secondary school, and university they wouldn't call school at all. They'd either call it university or uni. I haven't heard too many Irish people call the movies. More often they call it the cinema. Also movies they would call a film, and the TV they would often call a telly. Roommates is kind of more specifically when you're sharing a room together. So what we would call roommates, they would call housemates. You share the house. Gasping is a way that they would describe being very thirsty. Say you're hanging is to say you're very tired. You'd hear people after a night out, they'd say that they had the fear, which is to say they were worried about whatever happened the night before. If someone's very angry, they would say they were raging. They wouldn't call it a gas station, they'd call it a petrol station. Same way, they wouldn't say they were going to get gas, they were to go get fuel or petrol. Also, if you come here and you have a rental car, pay close attention because the black is actually the diesel and the green is what's the petrol gas. If they can't handle something, they say, oh, I can't cope. If you're exhausted, they say they're knackered. A lot of people know this already, but a holiday is a vacation. Here's so a van they would call a people carrier. They would still have the term van, but it's more so for a big truck that carries goods. Also, what we would call a semi, they would call a lorry. They use the word class a lot, kind of to say something's cool. Oh, that's class. They'd also use gas to describe something as very funny. So if they said that you're gas, it's usually a compliment. Not so much an expression, but just a difference here. If you're on a phone call and you're saying goodbye to somebody, they'll say it over and over for some reason. So when you're finished with the phone call, you'll say bye, 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 bye. Don't know why, but that's just how they do it. Something I've heard about in the early Irish language, they didn't have a word for 30 or something like that when it comes to telling time. I don't know how true that is, but certainly here you have, say, 2 o'clock, 2:15, half to is to say half past, 2:45 is to say 2:45, and then 3 o'clock. They will still use the term on sale, but you'll also often hear it say as on offer. If you're on the right track, people might say, oh, you're laughing. Sorted is to say it's done. I absolutely love this term, but there's trad music, which is traditional Irish music, but a lot of the times they'll call it diddly-eye. If you're kind of a jokester, they might call you a messer. But if you're messing around and it's kind of annoying or you're a liar, they would say you're taking the piss. Kind of a way to respond to somebody and saying, are you actually kidding? Is to say, are you having a laugh? Someone who takes risks might be called a chancer. But similarly, you could say it like if someone's hitting on you and they're saying, oh, he's a chancer. Also, the term chancing your arm is to say the same thing. You'd hear the word sound a lot, which is to say it's cool. So, oh, you got your homework finished early? Oh, sound. But it's also a way to describe somebody. So you could say, oh, that person over there, they're sound. So where we would say, I just finished something, they would say, I'm just after. So they could say, I'm just after finishing cleaning my car. A mall is a shopping center here. You'll also find that they use like and so at the end of a sentence. So where we would say, like, go over there, they would say, go over there, like. As well, if we said, so let's go to the mall, they'd say, let's go to the mall, so. Not everyone pronounces their THs the way that we would. So even my husband's the same. I always thought it would be funny if we named our kids like Keith or Matthew, because that's how I say it, but he would say it Keat or Matthew. When we were first dating as well, he was telling me a story about he knew someone who got stabbed in the tie, and I thought he meant somebody was wearing a necktie and got stabbed in the chest. So I was like, oh my gosh, they got stabbed in the chest. He's like, no, the tie. And he was banging on his leg. It was like, oh, the thigh. It's also kind of a Cork thing that any S or a lot of your S's or the SH sound. I even had my driving instructor, he would say, okay, we're coming up on a stop here. And again, a big expression is stop. It's very hard to take that seriously. A shopping cart is a trolley. And just so you guys know, you actually have to put in €1 or €2 to release it. They all lock together. So if you're wanting to use one, you just need to have 1 or 2 coins handy. What we would call pickles, of course, are pickled cucumbers, but here they are specifically called gherkins. Many people already know that chips here are what we would call French fries, and as well what we would call chips, they would call crisps. But they also call them Tatoes a lot of the time. Tatoes is a brand of potato chip, but they kind of use it in more general term, kind of the same way we would call a lot of just tissues Kleenex. Again, honestly, don't worry coming over here. You don't need to know a lot of these terms. They'll know what you mean when you're talking, but it's just so that you can have an idea when they're talking that you know what they're talking about. Thank you so much again for watching. I hope this was somewhat helpful.